Coming up ahead in this episode of Xtalks Spotlight.
Generally, a diversity action plan should be part of the multidisciplinary planning dialogue for a phase 3 or a pivotal study. And at a minimum, this includes visibility to study design and patient population, especially as it relates to the population intended to use the product if approved.
Where to look at the data, what data sources to pull in to build the prevalence is certainly helpful in terms of finding a partner for a diversity action plan. But it goes beyond just writing the plan. It's having a partner that understands the entirety and the holistic approach to diversity in clinical trials.
Hello, and welcome to Xtalks Spotlight, illuminating insights from subject matter experts and industry thought leaders. I'm Sonia Hunt. In this episode, we're exploring a critical topic. Diversity action plans in clinical trials are no longer a nice to have. Are you ready?
The US FDA continues to intensify its focus on improving diversity in clinical trials. To address the latest guidance and requirements, Fortrea is leading the way by helping sponsors develop their diversity action plans. In this Xtalks Spotlight edition, I sat down with two experts from Fortrea, Alicia McDowell, Head of Regulatory Strategy and Product Development Consulting, and Teresa Oblak, Senior Director of Regulatory Strategy, Product Development and Market Access Consulting, to gain insights into developing the right diversity action plan. Thank you for taking the time in the Spotlight interview, Teresa and Alicia.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
To start us off, what is a diversity action plan and why is it required?
Sure. So a diversity action plan is a relatively recently added piece of legislation that requires a sponsor to submit a diversity action plan, which outlines enrollment goals for underrepresented populations. So this has been building for the better part over 10 years. And we now have it enforceable with the passing of legislation in the U.S.
Now, when does the planning process for a diversity action plan actually begin in the clinical development program?
That's an excellent question. The planning process should begin as early as practicable. And while the exact timing may vary by program, generally, a diversity action plan should be part of the multidisciplinary planning dialogue for a phase 3 or a pivotal study. And at a minimum, this includes visibility to study design and patient population, especially as it relates to the population intended to use the product if approved, and operational activities focused on country and site selection, as well as any patient-focused efforts, such as capturing input for a protocol or firsthand lived experiences from patients who are representative of the intended condition.
And when should a diversity action plan be ready for submission?
That's a great question. According to the legislation, it is required to be submitted no later than the submission of a phase 3 or pivotal protocol. However, that said, we've had a lot of experience over the last 18 months with preparing and submitting diversity action plans. And we have seen FDA asking to submit these plans with an end of phase 2 package, with a SPA submission if you're seeking a special protocol assessment for your pivotal protocol. So we see some variability in enforcement, but the legislation indicates that it should be submitted no later than a pivotal or phase 3 protocol.
Now, how does a diversity action plan work in a global or multinational trial?
So FDA's guidance indicates that a diversity action plan for a global or a multinational trial must describe participant enrollment goals for the entire study, and it should not be limited to U.S. enrolled participants. Although I do caveat that the goals should primarily be informed by U.S. epidemiology data. We also know that overall study design, and that includes the selection of study sites, should account for the need to enroll a population representative of the U.S. intended use population. We also know that FDA has previously remarked that the representation of the entire study population will be considered when evaluating applicability to a U.S. patient population. So what does this mean? Sponsors should be prepared to track their study's relevant diversity goals for the US as well as from a global perspective.
And what are the key considerations a sponsor should evaluate to determine a best fit partner to support development of diversity action plans?
Thanks for that question. So, absolutely, experience is key. So, we've had a lot of experience with more than 45 plans over the past 18 months across different indications and different therapeutic areas, different types of molecules in development. So, understanding the nuances of the various programs and the target patient populations and where to look at the data, what data sources to pull in to build the prevalence is certainly helpful in terms of finding a partner for a diversity action plan. But it goes beyond just writing the plan. It's having a partner that understands the entirety and the holistic approach to diversity in clinical trials. So we also know how to execute, what strategies need to be employed to attract, recruit, and retain the patients, as well as tracking of our progress towards the diversity goals with a proprietary database that we've developed. So we have a holistic approach to diversity in clinical trials, and we have a deep understanding of how to write an accurate and successful diversity action plan.
As we know, it all comes down to the patients in the end. So how does a diversity action plan give diverse patient populations access to clinical trials?
When a diversity action plan is formalized, it's the culmination of dynamic efforts to improve representation in clinical studies, as well as enhance the strength and generalizability of available evidence for an intended use population of a product. But what does that mean for patients? A diversity action plan gives visibility to systemic barriers which prevent diverse populations from participating in clinical trials, for example, elements like geographic location and language barriers. It provides opportunities to build relationships with community organizations and leaders to raise awareness about clinical trials and encourage participation from underrepresented groups. A diversity action plan also fosters awareness around the needs of diverse patients, encouraging flexible trial design, which accounts for transportation, scheduling, access to technology for a patient to be able to participate in a trial. And finally, diversity action plans also provide opportunity to critically assess eligibility criteria to ensure that diverse populations are not unintentionally excluded. And while the list I just mentioned is not intended to be exhaustive, it certainly highlights various factors which influence patient access to clinical trials and how that plays a role in a diversity action plan.
Well, thank you very much, Alicia and Teresa, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your time and insights.
Thanks for having me. It was wonderful to participate.
It was lovely to be here today. Thank you.
We look forward to hearing more about Fortrea's efforts to help ensure diverse patient populations have access to clinical trials. Thank you all for joining us for this Xtalks Spotlight feature. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.